Hello there, my friends. My name is Carl Zipper. I run the Backwoods Engineering programs here at Mount Alamucci Scout Reservation in Byram, New Jersey. I'm located on the site of the historic Andover Forge tract. I'm here to talk with you today, about one of mankind's greatest endeavors, specifically the knot and the lashing. Of all the knots and lashings, let's cut that and just say of all the lashings, the one that I probably use the most is the square lashing. And for the sort of work I do, building various things like bridges and towers and rafts and catapults and cranes and, heaven knows what else. The square lashing is the lashing that you're going to use for probably, 3 out of 4 at least of the lashings you tie to build a project like that. So it's a lashing that's worth knowing, the right way to do, and it's a lashing that it's worth, taking the time to do it the best possible way that you can. I've spent a lot of time tying square lashings over the years, and I've figured out what I believe to be the best way to tie it. And so I encourage you, even if you already have some experience with this lashing, watch along, because you'll probably learn a thing or two that you didn't already know. First thing is, when do we use the square lashing as opposed to one of the many other lashings? A lot of people have told me over the years, Carl, it's right in the name. It's called the square lashing, so you use the lashing when the two spars are square to each other where they cross. That means when they're at 90 degrees where they cross. And those people are all wrong. You use the square lashing whenever the spars cross each other, at any sort of angle. You can see there's not a perfect right angle right here. So when they cross each other and when they are in contact with each other, when they touch where they cross. If they cross each other and they don't touch, there's a different lashing called the diagonal lashing. If they're parallel to each other, there's a couple different lashings you can use. But when they cross and they touch, regardless of the angle, the square lashing, is the one you want. So how do we start the square lashing? We start off by tying a clove hitch around one of these two spars. And you can gain a little bit of extra strength, when you make that lashing. If you put the clove hitch down where it's going to help absorb a bit of force once the lashing gets loaded up. 90% of the time that means putting the clove hitch underneath the lashing, because you're going to have forces from gravity on it, and you're going to have people climbing around on whatever you build, and that's also going to be pushing it down. So I'm going to put the clove hitch right here underneath where the spars cross. To make the clove hitch, it's very easy. You take your rope, you got your working end here, you wrap it around the spar so that up on top there's an X. You guys can see the X right here. Then once you have that X, keep wrapping around and tuck the working end right underneath the middle of that X. And tighten it up and make it look pretty. All right, so that's the clove hitch. It's underneath where the spars cross. It's right up against them too. Now the next step is the wrapping turns. Every lashing, has what's called wrapping turns, where the rope wraps around both spars to hold them together. To make the wrapping turns for the square lashing is pretty straightforward. What you do, you come up over one of the spars, around back behind the other one, up over again, and then around back behind again. So it's an over, under, kind of pattern. And now here's where the name of the lashing comes from, is when you're doing it, you're working around and you're forming a square. So you come over, under, under. And you keep going around, and the wrappings, you form them by going around in a square type direction. So that's one wrapping turn. The next big question when you're tying a square lashing is how many wrapping turns do you have to do? And I've heard people bandy about all sorts of ridiculous numbers, anywhere from 2 all the way up to 7 or 8. And there's only one right answer so far as I'm concerned, and that answer is that you do 3 wrapping turns. Once you've got 3 wrapping turns in, you're lashing, the breaking strength of the rope, it's going to come around enough times that it's, equal to or greater than the breaking strength of the spars. So any more, and you're not adding any appreciable strength. You're just making extra work. So I'm going to do 3. And now here's the next thing, that you might not have ever heard before about how to tie this lashing, which is when you do your next sets of wrapping turns, when you're, let's call it up on top of the lashing, up here where the camera can see nice and easy, you do your second wraps and your third wrap, you work to the outside of your previous wrapping turn. But when you're on the back of the lashing, back here, you go around to the inside of your previous wrapping turn. And the reason for that is going to become very apparent when we do the fraps in a few minutes. So let me do those now. I'm on the outside, up top. I'm on the inside. I'm on the outside. And I'm on the inside and back. And there we go. That's lucky number 3. Now, one other thing I'd like to point out, which is, whenever I stop to talk to the camera here, talk to you fine folks out in the internet, I'm always keeping a little bit of light pull on this rope. I never let go of it completely. Because if I were to do so, this would immediately get a bit looser, and that would be not so good. So I've done my 3 wrapping turns. I was on the outside of my previous turn. I worked out from the middle. On the top of the lashing, I worked in towards the middle on the back of the lashing. Now I have to do my frapping turns. What the fraps do is they go around the wrapping turns. They don't wrap around the spars. They wrap around the wrapping turns, and they pull them tighter than they are now. And the wrapping turns hold the lashing together, but the frapping turns are what make it tight. And a loose lashing is no good, so the frapping turns are really important. I'm gonna do 2 frapping turns. I've seen a lot of people over the years do more, but more is more work and it doesn't add any additional, tightness to the lashing. So let me come around the corner here, and there you go. You see, that's how we do the frapping turn, and you can see, how much, when I pull down, how much it tightens this thing up. This is also where you can see why that inside-outside business that I just did when I was making the wrappings is important. You see when this frapping turn, when it bends around the corner here, how the rope grabs on all 3 of the wraps that I just made. If you do your frapping turns, or if you do your wrapping turns, some other way, then odds are your frapping turn's only going to grab on the outermost one. So this way, since I'm pulling on all 3, I'm pulling it, presumably 3 times as tight as I would be if I'd done the wraps another way. The other thing you can see is every time I come around a corner just about, I pull, and you can also see I put the better part of my strength, or body weight into it. Okay. All right, so there we go. Clove hitch, 3 wraps, 2 fraps. The lashing's done, except that if I let go of it now, it's going to come apart, so I have to tie it off. The way I do that is I make another clove hitch around one of the spars. It doesn't really matter in the slightest bit, which one of these 4 locations you put that clove hitch at. I'm going to put it right here just because that's sort of where it's easy for me. Now to make that clove hitch up here, I'm going to tie it a different way than I did at the beginning. If I make that clove hitch the way I did at the beginning by wrapping around and forming the X and tucking under, I'm probably going to wind up with a clove hitch that's, up here somewhere, that's far away from the lashing on the spar. And there's a gap in between. And that gap is a terrible thing, if you intend for your lashing to be strong, because that gap means the clove hitch can slide down if you kick it with your foot or, any number of other reasons. And as soon as it slides down, your fraps loosen up and your lashing, goes all to pieces, basically. So we need the clove hitch as close as we can get it to the wrapping and frapping turns, ideally with no space at all in between them. And the way that we accomplish that is we tie the clove hitch differently. We do it by making a series of what are called half hitches. A half hitch is very easy to tie. It's a building block that you use when you're forming a lot of different types of knot. To make a half hitch, all you have to do is start wrapping around the spar, and as you're doing that, sort of hold the rope out a little bit back here. And as you come around, tuck the rope in between the spar and where you were holding it out. And this is a half hitch right here, Rope comes around, tucks under. Nothing to it. Right now, obviously, this half hitch has the same problem I was just talking about. It's too far away. But the half hitch is very easy to tighten up. All I got to do is pull, and I like to work it back and forth a little bit here too. And now it's in as close as it can get. Now a half hitch alone is not enough. I have to do another one. There we go. Cinch that back and forth, work it tight. And if you can see on the camera here, what I have here is I have a clove hitch. And it is as close as I can get it, you know, to the wrappings and frappings, and the rope comes right out of the frap right into the clove hitch. It couldn't be any closer, and that's what you have to have if your lashing's gonna stay together in the long term. One last thing I need to do now before I can call this well and truly done, and that is I have this extra rope here. I don't want to leave this hanging off for a number of reasons. Most importantly, it presents a safety hazard. You know, you could get tangled up in it and trip. Second is if it hangs down far enough that it's touching on the ground like it is here, that's bad for the rope. The ropes, it's better to keep them out of ground contact to the extent that you can. And reason number 3 is that it looks ugly. And if you're going to do all this work, right, why not have it look good? So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap up the extra. Going to wrap around. And when I've got no more rope to wrap around with, I'm just going to take it, I'm going to tuck it under here. Doesn't have to be anything real secure because it's just to keep the extra, you know, out of the way and looking good. So that is how you tie the square lashing. It's the most used of the lashings, at least for the sort of work I do it is. And so I think it behooves you, you know, to take the time to know how to tie it, understand why you tie it the way that you do, and do a good job. So I hope that in this video, you know, you learned a thing or two about all of that, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you very much.
Ready?
The audio's running?
Audio's running. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're good. Take it away, sir.
Okie dokie. You need the...
We need, yes,
yeah.
We need an audio mark. I don't know what's so funny about that, Carl. What could possibly be amusing you about saying audio mark?
Gotta show off my fancy name tag. Gotta look like it's not January.
My guy.
Yeah, they say you gotta suffer for your art, right, Rich?
Absolutely. That's why I'm back here, staying toasty. And you have a t-shirt.
Yeah, let me...
We'll just put a space heater at you.
That would be great, actually.